So I'm excited for our next talk. We have Mike Veilleux. I always have trouble with these French.
Veilleux. Hey, you Veilleux.
Mike Veilleux. So you may not have heard of Mike Veilleux, but you've definitely heard of Dyn. How many of you have used Dyn before, out of curiosity? Anybody that's a geek at one point in their life to use Dyn. You might remember Dyn as this company that would allow you to create a URL that you could hold on to, and it would forward to a particular IP for your computer. I've used it for years to remote into computers. But they do a lot more than that. Dyn also has an incredibly robust business in the email space, particularly around sending transactional mail. But just, much like Dyn has a lot of roots in kind of the underpinnings of the entire internet, they do a lot with email, which is, of course, a large part of that. Mike Veilleux here, he is the director of email product, responsible for stability, scalability, growth, and their entire email delivery platform. And what's kind of nice is you get to be kind of at the low level seeing what's really happening with all the ISPs as messages get delivered or don't deliver, or they bounce and things like that. So you know a lot from a macro level about performance. So I'm really excited to hear your talk. So Mike Veilleux.
Thank you, Jared. So yeah, it's a little bit different perspective than we've talked about so far this morning. We've talked a lot about how people use the inbox and interact with their mail. And this is going to be much more of a sender's perspective, and how does an email get to an inbox in the first place versus a spam folder being blocked altogether. So just a little different perspective than talked about so far. So I always like to start with some street cred, and I have to thank a lot of the people in this room for some stats that I'll use today. So for each delivered message, there's about 4 marked as spam. So that starts to show you there's a really enormous amount of email in the world. And if there's 4 times as much spam in the world, how much is really going on, and what type of impact is that having on infrastructure today? And secondly, out of all permission-based mail, so those that really isn't spam, how much of that actually makes it to an inbox? And that's about 78% of permission-based mail is making it to an inbox. So how did we get here, right? That seems like a pretty big problem. So the evolution of deliverability through the years. Saw a slide earlier too with the 1971 ARPANET emails born. So it's evolved from there. It took about 7 years for the first spam message, and then about another 16 years for the first large volume spam message to be sent. After that gave birth to email content filtering to try to catch these spammers and bad actors before they landed in users' inboxes to help improve the user experience of that. Really, spammers were creative, right? Spammers are marketers, spammers are creative. They started moving and trying to beat these content filters, and started putting different letters in subject lines and spelling things creatively and merging words and doing things like that to try to get the emails through, and content filtering evolved and stayed up with these. Eventually, another type of filtering was born, and that's reputation filtering. So the reputation filtering really said, enough with this content in the email to try to catch that. Let's start to look at the domains sending the email and the IP addresses sending the email. And so let's start monitoring those reputations to see if those people have sent spam before or are known for being sending spam or not. And so now really today it's a merge of both content filtering and reputation filtering that's making a decision on whether an email is landing in this inbox or the spam folder. And out of that, and some of the decisions into reputation engagement of that email, and a lot of what we talked about today and how people are engaging with those emails is really feeding back into that reputation, making the decisions on what's hitting the inbox. So what do senders monitor, right? So out of all that, so that's what's making the decision into the inbox. But as a sender of a large volume of mail to a large user base, what are they monitoring? I look at things as 3 groups, and it's a pyramid. You got to start from the foundation and work your way up. So senders are monitoring the basics, right? The bounce and complaint rates, open rates, click rates, those types of things. How people are engaging with their mail is a very basic trend that they can use to see how their mail stream's doing. Whether they're making good decisions on their list maintenance practices, or whether they're making good decisions on the content they're sending, the subject lines, that type of thing. Next tier up is domain and IP reputation. So we talked a little bit about IP reputation and domain reputation, but there's the third-party companies that monitor that and produce stats on that. So all that reputation is also another data point you can use, and it's sort of the next step, a layer of advanced metrics you can use. And then seed results. So seeding is a way to monitor inbox delivery, so you can actually understand how many emails or what percentage of mail is landing in the inbox or spam folder. And so seed results are sort of the next layer to optimize your deliverability across ISPs. So we're going to step through these. This is sort of a crash course, so it's going to be really quick. We're going to go through some different examples in each of these different segments, and sort of from a sending perspective and an ESP, how we help our enterprises reach their users in the inbox. So the first is metric ratios. So starting at that basic level, monitoring trends over time gives you a basic assessment, but starting to make ratios off these can help introduce the next layer of insight and education into your email program. So here's a study that we did. As an ESP, it's imperative that our network and our IP and domain reputation of our platform is extremely clean so that we can help our customers get mail to their customers' inboxes. So that means that we can't let customers on our network that are going to abuse the network and abuse users, send spam. So here's a study we did that helps us identify whether a mail stream is good or bad. So that may be interesting from a receiving standpoint too, to say, is this user good or bad? You can apply those same techniques. So we looked at our user base and a company's business model. So their business model, not what they said their list came from or anything like that, but their business model. And we split it up by their product they're selling, the product they're supporting, and the recipient base they're sending to. And so here in the blue, there's some example type companies that sort of fall in these different categories. The bottom left is sort of the most organic or the closest user to your application on the recipient base side, so very green. And then very green on the product side would be they're interacting with your application. So this is like Twitter retweets, transactional mail, invoices, or a Macy's deal, right? This is very, you signed up to receive this mail exactly. So that's application mail. As we go up to the daily deals, the difference here is that the product itself is sort of a third-party product. You signed up for Groupon deals, and the product that's coming in every day, you don't know what the product is. But you know that Groupon, you trust Groupon to send you a very good deal, and you're excited about seeing what deals come tomorrow and the next day and next day. As we go to the right lower box, the forward to friend, this segment is, it's their company interacting with you, but that company was told to forward that to you from one of your friends. So this is the invites, the forward to friends, maybe a shared of a download or a Dropbox file that's being shared with you. So the recipient base is deviating on that axis. And then up on the top right, this is red for a reason. These are the marketing affiliates. These are people that are trying to group really third-party products with the recipient base that really isn't theirs either. They're partnering into companies and trying to do this very legally, but it's really people that aren't expecting the mail to begin with. So this is sort of the trouble segment. So this was really useful for us to identify bad actors and bad mail streams before they got onto our platform. And let's look at some of the data that we found. So here we started looking at open and click rates there, but the complaint per open rate is what we really use to identify this as a bad actor. So you can see the complaint per open rate in the marketing affiliate segment is about 10 times higher than the complaint per open rates in the other segments. Now, it's not to do with just the open rate itself, because if you look at application-generated mail, the open rate is a little low too. But that's okay, because you're expecting that mail. You can read the subject line and tell exactly what it is. You know it's a Twitter retweet or something like that. And you're okay. You wanted that mail. You wanted that notification, but maybe you're not engaging with it, and that's okay. So there's some real benefits to looking at a ratio like this. It's a predictor of quality of mail. So right from the business model that a company has, you can start to predict the quality of the mail stream that they're going to have. It does factor in inbox rate because complaints can only happen on mail that land in inboxes. It can't happen on mail that landed in the spam folder. So this really factors in inbox rate to the ratio itself, which is nice. And then it's more accurate than just tracking typical complaint ratios over time. So that's just one example of how we use different ratios to increase our knowledge. So here's another. So bounces. So bounces create undeliverable email addresses that a sender should never send to again. Here's an example customer of ours that came to us and said, but why are my undeliverable list size 3 times the higher at Yahoo than it is at Gmail? And so they thought maybe there's something wrong. Maybe the bounces aren't accurate. What should we do? Should we review these? And we went down and reviewed all the bounce codes we were getting and made sure that these addresses were truly undeliverable. And they were undeliverable. But it still doesn't explain the differences in the size of the list size of undeliverable addresses. Why 3 times more for that customer at Yahoo than at Gmail? And so, possible reasons, and I can only speculate at these reasons. And so, I would love to chat with someone if someone has more data on this too. So feel free to find me after. But possible reasons that we can think of is regional adoption. So this customer is an Australian customer. So maybe they had regional adoption differences among Yahoo and Gmail from the region they were at. Advertising selection, maybe they were advertising differently in different streams to those different user bases. Age of recipient base, maybe they advertised 10 years ago in Yahoo and now recently in Gmail or something like that. Or just turnover among the accounts itself. Maybe it's a difference of the way people use Yahoo or the majority of users at Yahoo versus the majority of users at Gmail. And again, I can only speculate, but these are some of the things that we think about. So the key takeaway to me was not the exact reasoning, but it's definitely test the validity of your data, know that these addresses are undeliverable, but understand that there's going to be differences at different ISPs, so you need to account for that in your programs. So really customizing sending by ISP is really important. So next use case, so disaster recovery. So reputation recovery is really what we want to talk about. So this is that next tier up on the pyramid, the reputation and domain and IP reputation. And I love this cartoon. Your X-ray showed a broken rib, but we fixed it with Photoshop, so don't worry about that. And that's what a lot of senders do if they're not educated in the email space. They try to, okay, I got a domain blacklist. I should change my domain, or I got an IP blacklist. I need to change my IP. And that doesn't work. I know a lot of people in this room know that doesn't work. We really try to teach a holistic approach. So if something happens, you get a blacklisted, you get a block, you get into the spam folder, you need to fix that problem holistically. Don't run. A good fallback is to always email the most engaged users of your user base and be authentic. I have one customer that says he runs all his emails by his 14-year-old daughter to understand whether it's going to be creepy or not from a user perspective. So use things like that. Just understand you want to be authentic with your user base. And to optimize deliverability. So seed testing. So I compare seed testing to testing the pH level of a pool. Right? So we can't monitor all the emails we send out, just like we can't test all the pH level of the whole pool. But we can take a little sample set in a test tube, and we can send it out to email addresses that we own and see how we're doing and track that over time. It gives us insight into inbox percentage. It's ISP specific, just like the filter rules, the spam rules are ISP specific, so it's going to help you find your problem areas. And then you can use those metrics over time as control logic. So your list maintenance activities, do you need to be more conservative at one ISP versus another or not? So you can use all those as feedback into your control logic. So that's the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions or something, I would love to hear some questions from, especially receiver standpoint. Any questions on the email sending practices?
So I was curious about the Gmail versus Yahoo bounces, and I'm wondering if anyone knows if Yahoo's policy change on, I think, July 15th to reuse email addresses that were inactive, and therefore I think bounce emails that for those that became inactive, whether that could go into this data set?
So this was actually right before that. So this was not included in that data set, but it's a really interesting trend. I think it's a common problem in a lot of mailbox providers of having mailboxes sitting there that aren't used. So it's interesting to see Yahoo tackling that problem. I'm going to be interested in how that goes. There's a new X header, or a new header, if I might sort of advertise. So recipient valid since, I think is the header name. And it's an interesting tackle against privacy concerns against recycling email addresses. So if you're not familiar with that, check it out, or come see me or Yahoo representative. Thank you. Good question. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Great talks this morning. And feel free to come see me if you have any questions.